Come now, Holy Spirit, calm us and guide us and speak to our hearts, inspire us in our thoughts, and give us intuitions of the truth that you want us to see and apply it to our life. In the prophet Isaiah, we have this invitation to be ourselves the witnesses of our King and Maker. You yourselves are my witnesses, declares the Lord. And then we have this reference to the fact that we have to bear witness to the true God before whom we stand, and before whom we and all flesh are nothing whatsoever. No God was formed before me, nor will be after me. I am the Lord, and there is no other Saviour but me. You are my witnesses, declares the Lord. To bear witness, in our case, is to be totally an icon of the Lord in such a way that anything we say or do can be honoured and backed up by the Lord that we are serving. Verbo et exemplo. I mentioned earlier the responsibility that we have both towards God and man, and to the angels also when we are handling the things of God on behalf of the angels and of mankind itself. But there is more. If we understand what we are doing, our existence is linear. There is no moment in which we are compartmentalized. We are never actually at a break or on a real vacation, no more than God the Father is on vacation now and again. And that is why to withdraw the availability of our priesthood by concealing it physically is not wise, for we do not know what we might be missing, what graces are needed, because precisely we are visible. We are necessary means of grace at some times. And because one is wearing some kind of clerical visible recognition, things do happen, for better or for worse. How many confessions come out of nowhere at the most odd and peculiar times? I remember years ago in Rome, around midnight, after a vigil mass for Pentecost with the nuns at Quarta Coronati, coming down the main street, Via Merulana, and being accosted by a gentleman who just out of the blue said, "Could you hear my confession?" And only after hearing it did I realize that it was not indifferent, that I was there and recognizable. It turned out to be a priest. This then is what we carry around with us. And it can lead also to all kinds of contacts that would not otherwise happen. As it happens, I have noticed that in Drogheda, the town next to us, the superior of the Augustinians always wear his habit. Wherever he's going, he has his black habit on him, shopping or anything at all. And I noticed that that has given him a huge access to people's hearts. People immediately go to him, and because he has a warm humanity, he makes of all friends, precisely because he is a good icon. A priest who is a heavyweight is a black house in the ocean and not a lighthouse. Every word that we say, even our every regard, every feeling that we give, which is a bad vibe, is not of God, and the devil can use it to drive people away from the church itself. But also we have in our hands and in our day ways of reaching out to souls which operate because they are using what the Lord has given all humanity. I mentioned earlier the question that we have the means of giving consolation to people, specifically in church. Do you know that the devil has huge power over music? It has been said that possibly Lucifer was the angel of music. Whether or not that is true, he certainly knows its power and influence. And he has managed, in a fairly short span of time, to completely contaminate and bring down what humanity, at least the youth in humanity, had a right to. The youth no longer have access to beauty. The concept of music has changed radically, as has that of poetry that goes with it. For the lyrics are shoddy and quite nasty if one has the delicacy to be able to listen to what is being said, which is not always easy anyway. But the music too has changed in nature in such a way that it does not give healing or calm. It is not based on harmony or on the classical rules of music, which are actually of a mathematical order. There is an order in harmony, which is an echo of the Creator's own harmony. In the last couple of generations, we have been moving towards something which for the youth is taken as the only acceptable norm in practice. It is not music, it is damaging the soul. It is something which is also addictive, and one wonders why, and people are unable anymore to be without something into which they're plugged in. So the devil knows how to infiltrate the soul by all that is out there. We, as people in the work of the Lord, need to be fully switched on and aware of what's going on, and not to play with that game ourselves in the house of the Lord. So in practice, we are part of something greater, not only on the level of the Church's liturgy, which is the work of man par excellence, but also of humanity in its capacity to hand on something which is part of its heritage. Man has been able, over generations, to maintain one last blessing from the Garden of Eden, which was not withdrawn from it. The Creator left us the blessing and consolation of music. And it was picked up as such by all generations of mankind, each according to his culture. The Greeks already knew that there was something sacred, numinous, about the realm of beauty, both music and poetry, which are actually closely linked. Apollo was looked at as some kind of god of music, of beauty, of that, and it was classed as something inspired by divine spirits, the muses, hence its name, Musike Techne, the art of the muses. And these are considered in classic times as something which gave something beyond man to man, and man able to transmit that to somebody else. Whatever is true or not true, the fact is that it is something linked with the divine. And the proof is that it is the one language that we have in common with our angelic friends. There are people who have had strange experiences. We call them NDE, near-death experiences. They are actually clinically dead quite often, and they start to move. There was one who some years ago, actually quite a few years ago by now, in the 1970s I believe, had a terrible accident on a motorbike. He was a priest in India, Brother Joseph, and he was moving out of his body, and he was shown the other side, all of it. Hell, purgatory, and heaven. And when was the time to go out of those levels of purgatory, he'd already seen hell and been horrified by it, he was given an intuition, an intimacy, an intimation of something of what heaven was going to be. He couldn't yet be admitted to it, but he was drawing close to it for him to be given some idea of what was ahead if he carried on. And the first thing he perceived was music. He perceived the most angelic, ecstatic music. he was getting closer, and eventually he was given to understand that his time had not yet come, and he had to go back and bear witness. You shall be my witnesses. It is interesting that what he heard was music. There has been a case which has been recorded of a priest, now not long deceased, but he unfortunately has left us from old age, the great exorcist of Sicily, Don Matteo Lagrua. He had gifts and he was very well respected. And because of his gifts, he was asked by the hierarchy to take care of the whole charismatic movement on that big island. One day, he knew that something was going to happen on the day that was ahead. He was given an intuition from the Lord, something's going to happen. And they were in the middle of this whole day of prayer, and it came time to celebrate the sacred mysteries. You can actually see him, it's on YouTube. And it starts to happen. At the consecration, one starts to hear a distant sound, and it becomes louder and louder. And eventually one can hear what it is. It's unutterably beautiful, angelic music, singing. And the tapes were sent to the University of Palermo for analysis, and this came back from the science department. Having looked at all this and gone into all the possibilities, it has been concluded that there is no human explanation for these sounds that are beyond the gamut of the human voice, and no known instrument can create them. So they were puzzled. Moreover, that same spirit which has been always inspiring beauty from the beginning of time has not ceased to do so. He is doing so in every generation. We still sing what was inspired way back already at the time of Gregory the Great. The monks already had the art of using the 8 tones and making them into beautiful melodies. And it works. It's something inherited because one grows into it. One sights read Gregorian chant from being exposed to it day and night with the other brethren. It's slightly different from the Eastern 8 tones. They too function, but they have their own way, and they have semitones and demi-semitones which are different from ours. But it doesn't stop there. The difference between the West and the East is that it has been more open to renewal in the West, although actually in the East they have, especially in certain countries like Russia itself, a high tradition of polyphony in the liturgical mode with mixed choirs, whereas in Greece they tend to be males, usually 1 or 2. It's very small, at least on parish level. However, they have one thing in common, that they know how to create something which is worthy of the angels. Interestingly, in the West, we had the plethora of renewal that happened in the Renaissance when all the beauty what was out there came into the liturgical sphere as well, through people like St. Philip Neri harnessing it. And the fact that he was a friend of Palestrina made it possible to have the best of music coming into our liturgical field. We can have it coming also in Austria with the use of the talent of Mozart and so on, things which are angelic in tone. But it doesn't stop there. When I was in France in the 80s, there was a lot of renewal going on. The charismatic renewal was extremely powerful, and new congregations were being born. Les Béatitudes, Bain de Vie, Chemin Neuf, and so on. And they were going on from strength to strength. The Beatitudes were opening a monastery about twice a year in different countries, so 2 monasteries a year being opened, and they all had this in common, that they used the beauty that they were able to create, because they were all young and they were male and female. But they interestingly used the best of what was already there. The liturgy became very Byzantine, very Oriental in tone, and also very Semitic, because they used quite a lot of Hebrew as well. They therefore knew how to harness what was ancient and what worked. And because they were young, they created great beauty, which had a knock-on effect. It meant that young people were wandering off the streets and coming to their celebrations and being hit. They might have been on drugs or whatever, I heard testimonies, but they were hit by beauty. Something of that has also come in the fairly recent movement of Jerusalem. You've got these moines en ville, monks in the city, Saint-Gervais. They're in Florence, they're in lots of big cities now, and they also use the fact that they're mixed, young, and are creating great beauty, often of Oriental style. Now, just to be aware that these are all new and modern, but they have looked back. They have not used a shortcut. Recently, there was a larger number of ordinations in the Archdiocese of Paris than for quite a few years. There were about 22, and 9 of them were from the Emmanuel community. So that is interesting too, because these have been creating beauty out of music which was worthy of liturgy. We had the interesting experiment which actually seemed to have worked, of Taizé in France, which originally was Protestant but became more and more Catholic as time went on. Music which is harmonious, simple, and doesn't need books. One closes one's eyes and one goes into harmony, and it creates, yes, an atmosphere. So knowing how to create an atmosphere is also serving God and man together, because it places man in an ambit of angelic praise and beauty and lifts his soul and consoles his being. For when the emotions are awakened, the spirit also is awakened, and so is the will. And it begins to say yes to what the Lord is asking. Beauty is our heritage, and we, as people involved with praise, must be aware of its power to console man and honour God. I was brought up in Wales, and Wales, as you know, is a land of great beauty when it comes to song. Gwlad y Gân, the land of song. And already in the Middle Ages, Gerald the Welshman, Geraldus Cambrensis, talks about in his writing how they automatically go into 4-part harmony. That's always been there. I remember as a child, because I was brought up in the Baptist church, I was baptized there at the age of 13 by immersion, but I remember when I was moving towards something else, this was keeping me there for a while. I remember on a Sunday evening, there were 2 consolations, even for a child actually. It was watching the preacher warming up. You could see him. You could see he's getting warmer. He's heating up. And you can see we have ignition. And at a certain point we have liftoff, and off he would go. The whole body would come into it, the whole way of almost chanting. It was a Welsh technique going into hwyl, going into sail it means, which has come down from bygone ages, which they still cultivated. And I remember in class in Bangor, my friends were also aware of it. One of them could do it still. He was only in his 20s. But then the other consolation was the hymns. And when it came to the end of a Sunday evening, because you'd spend not just one moment on a Sunday, but the whole day in practice. Well, on a Sunday evening, the whole conclusion was quite dramatic. You could see them building up to the last hymn, and the organist would be pulling out the stops bit by bit. It would get louder, and the whole chapel would rock and vibrate, and they would repeat, and they would repeat, and they'd hit the roof and go into harmony. This was something of angelic mode on earth. We must claim it. We short-change our communities if we give them the shoddy, the happy, the clappy, and also the bass. It's an insult to God and man to give him what actually is not worthy of him. So rather than bring in what is in the world into the church to make it more relevant, let's be aware that by doing so we're playing the devil's game. More of the same thing. But actually I have noticed that celebrating the only public mass I have once a week, the Latin one, the Tridentine one, with permission I have it in church. The church fills, and it fills with young people who respond very well to a cloud of incense and a chant which somehow is beyond time. Let's claim our heritage not be shy to enthrone the King of Glory.